I am going to edit this image. As you can see, it is a food shot on white in a white dish. And that means color and texture are really the only thing left that we see in the food. Foods that is shot in a more lifestyle approach, while you still notice the color of the food, everything in a still image like this, you're able to absorb every detail. But when it's shot on white in a white dish, color and texture is so much more prominent. So you can see that our greens are a little bit bland, and we can bring that out. This one isn't as bad as some of the others that I've seen in this series. Just looking at the food, you know, you plate it, or if you were the one going to eat it, it would still look great. But on white dish, you look at the food after it's shot and you're like, oh my gosh, you know, the colors are really off. And they're not off in the sense of, you know, the food is bad, because the food is good, but it's off in the sense of it being next to white, the colors just don't look as good. Most of this I'm going to be fast forwarding through. It would be a lot for you to watch in real time, and there's no way you want to, you know, hear nothing as I'm busy editing. So some things I'll try to talk you through, but for the most part, the rest of this video will be fast forwarded as I work through it. So first thing I'm doing is I'm pulling it into Darktable, and then I will apply some of the basic settings that I typically do. And some of these I apply just because of the camera I have. And by no means am I saying what I do is the best way to do this, because I'm sure there are other ways to do it, not only in other software, but within the software I'm using. So just keep in mind, my way is not the only way. It's just the way I choose to do it. So why did I just do that? Why did I drop it down? But you can see over here I was clipping, and I'm still clipping just a little bit. There's no detail in here, but I want to be able to bring back some of the detail that had been lost in some of these other places where it was clipping. So here's where it was before, here's where it is after, and when I go to make my finished edit, I will be bringing some of this detail back into the finished image. So let me make sure. I've done some other things, so I want to make sure that my saving settings are correct. Okay, and let's export that TIFF. That is export 1. Some of this is going to be going just a little bit slower too, as far as processing and that sort of thing, as I am recording my screen at the same time I'm doing a fairly heavy workload with images. It won't be seen as much here in Darktable, but when I move to GIMP and I start combining all of those layers, some of these things might slow down just a little bit. Now what I'm doing here is I'm looking at the color of my potatoes. That's just a little bit too high. Drop it down just a little bit, and yeah, those potatoes are looking better. Okay, so let's go ahead and export a version of that. The next thing I want to focus on is my greens. So the color of the cheese looks alright, the color of my potatoes is fine, but I really want to liven up these greens because they look, well, blah. And some of that is the way that it is cooked. Ideally, I would like to photograph greens, especially spinach like this, before it has been fully cooked. It hits the pan, it wilts, and then it's photographed. No time to sit. It doesn't cook long, and that really preserves the color and the texture of greens. Sometimes you really don't have a choice with that. And this is where one of my favorite modules, Color Zone, comes into play. So I'm going to take a dropper selection of this. What I like to do is bring up the lightness just a smidgen. And then I also want to simultaneously increase the saturation. So if you notice, it's messing with all of my yellows. And I could take the time to use one of the masks and make it so it's just the green and not the yellows, but that'll really take a lot of time. And I found that I can do this faster and more efficiently if I just now take this and make it a layer in GIMP. So here's with the module off. There's what my greens look like with it. Of course, my yellows are all blown out and look freaky scary, but don't worry about that. We're not keeping that in the finished image. Let's export that. Okay. Next up. Bring this back down. So now I've got some green or some red peppers in here. And I also want to make them pop in this dish. They're one of the best colors in it. So I'm actually going to darken my reds a bit. And then I'm also going to bring my saturation up. Okay, so here they look funny. They're way overblown, and I wouldn't typically have them at this percentage in a finished image. What am I going to do? I'm going to export it. But just because my reds are this red here doesn't mean they're going to be that red in the finished image. I can change the opacity of the layer in which my peppers are on for that final look. All right, I think we're ready to hit GIMP. So I'm going to take Darktable at the top because what I want is some of this extra information. When I'm opening images in GIMP, if I can see this file number when I'm first getting started, it helps speed things along just a little bit. And I don't like opening and closing windows too much. I will go ahead and close Darktable if I have to, if it's not working, well with screen recording. So let's go ahead and open our first layer. So while I'm calling this the quote-unquote base layer, it's not the actual layer I'll keep on the bottom because my bowl and everything else is way too dark. First, I'm going to name these real quick, just to help me see what layer is which, and so I know exactly what I'm editing. So now all of my layers are named, and that'll help me as I'm going through the process. I'm going to need one more layer, at least, which is my white layer. In the end, I need to get rid of the gradient on this image for the use of them. I'm still going to keep some shadow in the bottom. It helps so much more with the depth and detail. I am not one of those photographers that hate shadow. I love shadow, Why do we love shadow? Shadow shows depth and texture. Shadows are good. Okay, back on task. White, normal. This is not transparency, it needs to be white, and we are okay. So now let's start painting in our layers. And for this, I like to use a Wacom tablet. I honestly don't know exactly how you're supposed to say that. I've heard it Wacom, I don't know. I'm going to use my graphics tablet to help with this. And I like it because it gives me just a little bit more control. I seem to be able to hit the layers that I like. And it also seems to be harder, or not harder, easier on my wrist. I do have a vertical mouse, but the tablet just seems to work better, more fluid, easy movements. Alright, so we need a layer mask for this. And the layer mask that I use the absolute most is black. I'm usually taking things, blanking them out, and only bringing back exactly what I need. It's not enough to bring it all back, but it's just enough to bring back just a little bit of the detail in those hot spots. Now, I still do want highlights, and you're not going to get away from having highlights, especially in something as shiny as melted cheese. It's just a very efficient surface, meaning that it bounces light back to you really well. That's part of the reason that we know it's smooth and melted, is the shininess that it has. However, just because it gives us good shine doesn't mean that we don't want some of those details still. So I'm starting to like that. We're still just a little bit hot, a little too hot right in here. All right, let's start adding our greens back in. I'm wanting to hit the greens, but I'm don't want to hit the eggs. I want just the greens to come up in color. It really does make them look fresher. And really, so if you can see, in all reality, we're really not bringing them that much more. We're just adding some vibrance overall. Now we have this green here. I'm not sure whether I want to keep it or if I'm going to be editing it out. There's a good chance I'll be editing that one out. Greens look better. Okay. Now it's time for the peppers. And that's it. You were with me as we went through the whole editing process for this image. Now it's time to upload it. Thanks so much for joining me, and if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comment section. We'll catch you later.